بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed. So inshallah today we'll go over al-Qawaaid al-Fiqhiyya, legal maxims, and basically to give you like a bird's view on where we are, because that's always important, because many times, growing up when I attended classes, sometimes you get lost, you don't know where you are. So let's just zoom in on where we are. So this is the al-Qawaaid al-Fiqhiyya class. Which means legal maxims. And we said that this class, the book and the class, will be divided into 4 sections. And we said the first of the 4 sections would be the intros. And we said the introductions about the 10 principles that introduce any subject. And we went over the definition and the relationship between the science and other sciences, and the fruit of learning it, and all of the, الحد والموضوع الثمرة نسبته وفضله والواضع الاسم الاستمداد حكم الشارع مسائل والبعض بالبعض اكتفى ومن دار الجميع هذا الشرف. So we went over the 10 principles, we went over the introductions, and then we said that the second section is about the 5 major legal maxims. And we said the first one is al-umur bimaqasidha, and that's where we are. Al-umur bimaqasidha is the first one of the 5 major legal maxims, which means matters are judged by their intentions. Matters are judged by their intentions. Okay. So where we are here? So and certainly, the third section will be about the minor legal maxims, and the third section will be about the legal regulators, or al-Dawabit al-Fiqhiyya, the regulators that belong to one chapter only. So we are here. And then we said under each one of these qawaid, we will talk about certain things. We said we will talk about, wait a second. Let me get this back. So we said, Oh, really? We said we will talk about certain things, mainly 4 things that we will talk about under every one of these maxims. And the first thing is the expression, different expressions, and the explanation of the meaning of the maxim. And then justification, substantiation, proof, the evidence, so proving the maxim. And the third would be guidelines and benefits. Guidelines and benefits. And the fourth will be what? Applications. But not only applications, but branches, the branches of the maxim, subsidiary maxims and applications. So where we are when it comes to matters are judged by their intentions. What are we doing now? We're done with the explanation, we're done with the proving, we're in the guidelines and the benefits that we learn from the maxim. And last time, we talked about when we certainly we were talking about the conditions last time. The conditions for the validity of the intention. The conditions for the validity of the intention. Prior to this, we were talking about what? We were talking about the deeds that don't require an intention. And then we moved on to the conditions of the validity of the intention. So this is where we are now. Conditions of validity. How can we ensure the validity of our intentions? And then we said that the conditions of the validity, are two groups. One group is the positive conditions, the things that are, required for the intention to be valid. The second are the negative, which means things that must be avoided for the validity of the intention. We call this عدم المنافي, absence of nullifiers. Absence of nullifiers. So when we talked about the conditions that are required to be present, we spoke about Islam, or faith. We spoke about reason. We spoke about tamyiz, or discernment. And we spoke about knowledge of the intended. You have to know what you're doing. And it actually, if you know what you're doing, then you have an intention. Then we will talk today about عدم المنافي, absence of nullifiers. Absence of nullifiers. Okay, so when we talk about the absence of nullifiers, we will talk about the following. We will talk about 7 different nullifiers. 7 nullifiers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It doesn't always work, but anyway. So shirk is certainly the first one, and since this is it's in English, I'm going to write from left to right here. So shirk, or associating partners with Allah, is the first one. At-tashriq, that is basically mixing intentions, is the second. And it's not all kinds of tashriq, not all kinds of mixing, and that's what we will learn about today. Then at-taraddud wa-shak, which would be hesitation and doubt. Taraddud wa-shak. Hesitation and doubt. Then al-qata' wal-istithna'. Al-qata', which is the interrupted niyyah. Interruption. Al-istithna' is to make exceptions. Al-istithna', to make exceptions from the niyyah. And then al-qalb, which is to switch, to change, to flip, switch, change the niyyah. Okay, and the last one would be al-azm ala fi'l ma yunafiha. Al-azm ala fi'l al-munafi. Intending to do a nullifier. And we'll talk about this in detail. What if you intend when you're fasting to eat? What if you intend when you're praying to drink or to speak? Okay, So now this is where we are. Okay, yes. So this is where we will be today. We will talk about tashriq as the nullifiers that need to be absent for the niyyah to be valid, because we're talking about the conditions of the validity of the niyyah. This is under the guidelines, which is one of 4 parts of any qaida that we will speak about: explanation, justification, guidelines, branches, and applications. Okay, so having said that, let's start. Absence of nullifiers. For the niyyah to be valid, you have to ensure that you don't have any nullifier of the niyyah, the validity of the niyyah. The first nullifier would be, of course, shirk. إنه من يشرك بالله فقد حرم الله عليه الجنة ومأواه النار وما للظالمين من أنصار. So the first one is to ascribe partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that would invalidate any niyyah, and that will earn the person a place in hellfire for eternity. So hopefully we don't need to go into much detail about this, because we should be clear of this, I hope. Then at-tashriq, which is mixing intentions. At-tashriq, which is mixing intentions. Now, mixing intentions, I mean, it does not mean that people don't fall into shirk. People do fall into shirk. I'm just saying that hopefully the people who are here and the people who are listening to this class are not basically devoting any act of worship to other than God, or to God and someone in addition to God, and so on, because that would be the shirk that would earn us a place in the hellfire for eternity. So the tashriq is mixing intentions. Tashriq is mixing intentions. So what are the types of tashriq, which is mixing intentions or combining intentions? The first type of tashriq, mixing intentions, combining intentions, or mixing, is when you basically mix. So here, it's an act of worship. So I'm not going to just write act of worship, just worship. So an act of worship, you mix it with mubah, something that's mubah, permissible, or ostentation, showing off, pretension, ostentation, pretension, showing off. Are they the same? No, they are not the same. But, for the sake of brevity, we will put them together and then we will discuss them in some detail. The second one is to mix an act of worship with, the second one is not to mix an act of worship no. The first one we already covered, which is basically to devote an act of worship to Allah and someone else. This is the second one. So the first one was the shirk itself. This is the second one, which is to mix worship with mubah or ostentation. The third one is mixing 2 acts of worship together. The fourth one is to mix 2 tasarrufat, not acts of worship, tasarrufat, legal conduct. Tasarruf is legal conduct. Mix 2 tasarrufat without clear intention, or to basically to say, and we will just to get this out of the way, to say to your wife, أنت علي حرام, you are forbidden to me, intending zihar and talaq simultaneously. Where does that go? This is not an act of worship, it's a tasarruf, legal conduct, but here, where does that go? Is that zihar or talaq? This is what we will discuss when we get to it. So to mix two tasarrufat, tasarruf, legal conduct is the best translation for tasarruf, because it's not just any action, it's a legally consequential action. So it's a legal conduct, and two of them. So we're already done with shirk, which is to devote an act of worship to Allah and someone else. And that is, the ultimate loss. But then we will talk about worship plus mubah versus ostentation. And then we will talk about worship plus worship. And when we talk about worship plus worship, worship comes in two different forms. There is fard and there is mandub. So we will talk about three different types under this one. Fard plus fard, fard plus mandub, mandub plus mandub. To mix the intention for two obligations, to mix the intention for two recommended acts, to mix the intention for one obligation and one recommended act. These are all different. So there will be three different categories under this discussion. Let us first start with worship, and to mix worship and something that is mubah. Mixing worship plus mubah. What would be examples to mixing worship plus mubah? Mubah may not necessarily be simply mubah. It could also be preferred or something. But mixing worship with something that is mubah. The very clear examples, there are many clear examples. If you go to Hajj, will you also not be wanting to see new places? Is there like something in like some part of you wanting to see new places? Don't people sometimes bike to Mecca? They take a tour through whatever, Asia, Europe, Africa. They bike to Mecca. Would that invalidate their Hajj? Because they are going to Mecca, but they are also wanting, to tour all the cities on their way to Mecca. Or they are flying, but they are interested in touring or seeing new places and so on. And even when they go to Mecca, they will see they are interested to do tourism inside Mecca and Medina and do things other than Hajj per se. Would some people not be interested in trade? At least they want to buy some gifts for their family and stuff. When you fast, aren't you a little bit interested in dieting? When you make wudu or ghusl, aren't you a little bit interested in refreshment and cleanliness? All of these things are happening. So does that invalidate your niyyah? No, although it may diminish it. May diminish the reward, I'm sorry, not the niyyah. May diminish the reward, but it does not invalidate. And it depends on, how much is it, because some people can go to Hajj every year, but they are business people, they do business, they purchase stuff, and they come back and sell it. So like part of the journey, like an integral part of the journey is business. So it may diminish the reward, but it will not invalidate the niyyah. May diminish the reward, may diminish the reward, will not invalidate the niyyah. Okay, so when the Prophet ﷺ prayed and taught the people the prayer simultaneously. Is that mixing intentions? Yes. So he prayed. And what if you pray to avoid like an annoying person? What if you extend your prayer and someone walks into the room or walks into the masjid and you just want to avoid the annoyance and you extend your prayer to avoid them? Does that invalidate your niyyah? It doesn't. It may diminish the reward. It's not like you're extending the prayer because you're just enjoying your soft conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much. But it will not invalidate your niyyah. Will not invalidate your niyyah. So you see how lenient the Sharia is with mixing worship with mubah? Because the Sharia does recognize that we have needs. And sometimes, لا ينفك يعني لا تنفك هذه عن تلك, or they're associated, they are bound together, like making wudu and refreshment and cleanliness, or ghusl and refreshment and cleanliness, fasting and dieting, trade and hajj, hajj and tourism, they're just bound together. So the Sharia recognizes that we human beings, we have needs, so there is no problem there. However, when it comes to ostentation, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. And there is a particular excerpt that I will want to read for you because it's very important, very valuable, nas from Matalib ul-Nuha. Imam al-Ruhaybani said al-Matalib ul-Nuha, and this will be a long read, but I want to read it for you because it will be very beneficial. And I just want you to notice, pay attention to the following, because he will talk here about ostentation at the outset, at the beginning of action. Ostentation that emerged during, like you had a niyyah already, and then the thought of showing off, landed on you after you had a niyyah. After you had a niyyah, the thought of showing off landed on you. Then pay attention to two distinctions. One is when you resist and fight it off. The second one is when it persists. The thought of ostentation persists. So there is ostentation at the outset, there is ostentation that emerges after having a good niyyah. When the ostentation emerges after having a good niyyah, it either, you either fight it off or it persists. And if it persists, then did it dominate? Is it equal? Is it subservient, subsidiary, secondary to the niyyah of taqarrub or devotion to Allah? Okay? So these are different. So now pay attention. I'm going to read this excerpt from Matalib ul-Nuha by Imam al-Ruhaybani rahimahullah ta'ala. He says, the validity of it, which means the validity of the prayer, is not invalidated, or the prayer is not invalidated, or the intention for the prayer is not invalidated after performing it with a valid intention, intending to teach it, as the Prophet ﷺ did, or intending to avoid a dispute. Okay, so this is the part that, I'm not going to read this part. This is the part that we went over already, about, praying to avoid like an annoying person, or fasting to lose weight, or making wudu for refreshment, etc. But okay, so the part about ostentation, he quotes this. Matalib ul-Nuha is a commentary on Ghayat al-Muntaha. Ghayat al-Muntaha combines between al-Iqna' wal-Muntaha. So you have very important books in the madhab al-Hanbali, al-Iqna' wal-Muntaha are extremely important books. Ghayat al-Muntaha combined them because sometimes they disagreed. And then Matalib ul-Nuha would be a commentary on the book that combined them. However, here he will be quoting al-Hafiz ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. He's not actually, he's not writing a commentary in this segment that I will read now on Ghayat al-Muntaha, although it is part of Matalib ul-Nuha, but it's a commentary on an excerpt from the speech of al-Hafiz Zayn al-Din ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, who is the author of which book? Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam, a very important, very like monumental, important book, not limited to the madhab, but for all people. So he says, pure ostentation rarely occurs in a believer's obligatory prayer or fasting, though it may occur in acts like charity or Hajj. So no one will be, no true believer be praying with, to show off. Yeah, it's very hard. Or fasting to show off. Hajj, sometimes. Sadaqah, yeah, sometimes. But, not praying and fasting. He says no Muslims doubts that such acts are nullified. No Muslim doubts that such acts are nullified. Sometimes the worship is for Allah, and ostentation joins in. If ostentation accompanies the act from its inception, then the authentic texts indicate its invalidity, even though some later scholars disputed this. So the later scholars who disputed this, they said if it accompanies the act at its inception, but it is not the dominant intention, it would still not invalidate it. Greatly diminish the reward, but not invalidate it. However, the official position is if it accompanies the act at the outset, at the beginning, it invalidates the intention. Okay, so he says, if the act was initially for Allah and then ostentation occurred after beginning it, and the person rejected it, it doesn't harm their worship, and it remains valid without dispute. You fight off you get the thoughts cross your mind of showing off, you fight them off, that's it. You're safe. No dispute about this. You are safe. But then he says, if the thought of ostentation persists, whether it nullifies the act or not is a matter of disagreement. If it persists. Why is a matter of disagreement? Because does it persist and dominate? Is it equal? Or is it subservient to the other intention of devotion to Allah? So it's a matter of disagreement among the predecessors, as mentioned by Ibn Jarir, that's Imam Ibn Jarir al-Tabari. The Imam Ahmad preferred that the act is not nullified. The act is not nullified by this because the worship was initially built on a sound foundation. So the later occurrence of this thought does not invalidate it. Others mentioned, other than Imam Ahmad, people other than Imam Ahmad mentioned, there is no sin in an act mixed with ostentation if the intention to obey God dominates. For good deeds erase bad ones. Conversely, if the intention to show off dominates, the person sins according to the narrations forbidding it. If the motives are equal, so the person is unable, is just like, can't really decide what he's doing this for. If they are equal, then there is neither reward for them nor sin upon them. There is neither reward nor sin. Based on the verse, and so the verse here, وآخرون اعترفوا بذنوبهم خلطوا عملا صالحا وآخر سيئا عسى الله أن يتوب عليهم إن الله غفور رحيم. So others, and there are others who have admitted their sins. They have mixed a righteous deed with another that was bad. So here, it's not mixing the deeds. The intention itself is a deed. So they're mixing bad and good intentions, mixing them. Perhaps Allah will turn to them in forgiveness. So they're not getting rewarded, but at the same time, there is no sin. Then he says, and an act of worship is not to be abandoned out of fear of being attributed to Riyah. Sometimes, and this is important, that's why I want you to pay attention to the parentheses that I have, because the original text said what? The original text said, and the act of worship is not, that is between parentheses, that's the original text. And an act of worship is not to be abandoned out of fear of Riyah. Out of fear of Riyah. He explained by inserting between the text out of fear of, and he inserts being attributed to Riyah. So it's not out of fear of Riyah, it's out of fear of being called the Mura'i. So, like, people are collecting sadaqah, and then you really want to give sadaqah, and then you say to yourself, no. They may say, I am doing it to show off. This would be haram. Haram to refrain from giving sadaqah out of fear from people thinking that you're showing off. Once you have worked on your intention and rectified your intention, ignore the people, basically, remove them. Talked about fana al-shuhud before in manazil al-sa'irin. That's what it is. Remove them now from your calculation. So, and an act of worship is not to be abandoned out of fear of being attributed to Riyah if the intention is sincere, because abandoning it for the sake of people is shirk, just as performing it for their sake is Riyah. Then he says, and we hope for a reward for one who recites the Quran and does similar acts without intention, especially in these times when calamities have stunned the minds. In al-Mubah, that's an important Hanbali book, there is no reward without intention by consensus. Even though, now he gives his commentary on this statement in Mubah, even though some scholars chose otherwise, which is befitting his grace, glory be to him, for he promised not to waste the reward of those who do good deeds. إن الله لا يضيع أجر من أحسن عملا is what he meant to say. So what did you get now from this important excerpt? You got that aniyya, that basically aniyya that mixes like a bad intention or like pretentious intention that mixes with your valid intention at the outset is likely invalidating. That's the official position, although some people said it depends on which one dominated. Now, if it emerges during the act after having a valid niyyah, sincere niyyah, and then the pretentious thoughts emerge during the act, and you resist those intentions, then certainly your niyyah is valid without dispute if you fight them off. Because bad thoughts will happen. Bad thoughts will happen all the time. So Don't worry about that. Then if it persists, then did it dominate? Is it equal to the intention of devotion? Or is it subservient to the intention of devotion, secondary to the intention of the devotion? If it dominates, then there is no doubt that your action is invalid. If it is less than the niyyah of devotion, is subservient to the niyyah of devotion, the dominant intention, you're comfortable that you're just doing this for Allah. Yes, because we're social beings and we like to be liked and we like to be praised and we like to be accepted and all of that stuff. We get this like nagging thought but if it is less and you're still keeping it as, you're still keeping it under pressure, so it's not dominating and it's not equal, then hopefully your act is valid. Your niyyah of devotion is still valid. If it is equal, if it became equal, then it's neutral. لا لك ولا عليك. لا لك ولا عليك. No reward, no punishment. No sin, no hasana, no sayyah. So that is basically the difference between mixing with mubah and mixing with pretentious or intention or ostentation or showing off. Which one was much less harmful than your niyyah? Mubah. That is why don't pursue the dunya with your deen. If you want to pursue the dunya, pursue the dunya. It's much better off, if you seek knowledge to show off, then you're much better off going on a trip, finding some pleasure, eating a bowl of ice cream, like doing whatever it is that will give you a little gratification, because you will be much safer. You will be much safer with mubah than ostentation. Okay. Now, next is what? And before we move on to this one, what did he say at the end about reciting the Quran without intention? He said something about reciting the Quran without intention, and he said that we hope that the person will get a reward. What is he trying to address here? He's trying to address the very consistent qaida that we talked about before, لا ثواب إلا بنية. There is no reward without intention. And he says in al-Mubda', he said this is a matter of agreement. It's a matter of consensus. There is no reward without intention. But he says in our times that, calamities have stunned the minds and so on. We hope that people will be rewarded for good deeds without intention. So he's trying to address this. لا ثواب إلا بنية. لا, no, ثواب, reward, إلا, except with, بنية, with a intention. Okay, so I think that the best way to answer this is to say there is a niyyah without a niyyah. Which niyyah? The general niyyah of Islam, the general niyyah of submitting to God is a niyyah that basically permeates through all of your life. Because the state of the believer proclaims لسان حال المؤمن إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. So if the believer got himself accustomed to doing good, so it is about, the orientation towards God and doing good. The general orientation towards God and doing good. If you get yourself accustomed to doing good, to the extent that good becomes a second nature. So to guide a blind person across the road, to give water to a thirsty dog, to, make tasbih, to read the Quran, to do things, like good things like this, without أن تعقد قلبك عليها, without sort of bringing the intention to heart at the time of doing it, because it is your second nature, then the most generous, it is thought of the most generous, most gracious, that he will not deprive you of reward. Because you've gotten yourself to a point where good deeds are your second nature. Like you don't even think about it, you just do good. So that general orientation towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in doing good is your ongoing intention. It's basically uninterrupted intention. So while it is better and superior to bring on a good intention at the time of the act, at the time of every act, yet without that good intention, that ongoing intention of إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين, say my prayer and my rights and my life and my death are all for Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Then that's your intention. That is your ongoing, uninterrupted intention. So we're done with this part. Now, the third division here is where we will stay, The fourth, we finished it. We finished the fourth. What was the fourth? Legal conduct plus legal conduct. What was the first? Devoting an act of worship to Allah and someone else. What was the second? Mixing between the intention of an act of worship and a mubah or ostentation. What is the fourth? Two legal conducts. To say to your wife, you are haram, anti-haramun alayya, stuff like that. Intending zihar and talaq. What happens in this case? It will divert by default to al-awla bil-lafz, to that which is more consistent with the wording. So in this case, when someone says to their wife, anti alayya haram, you are forbidden to me, that is closer to zihar than talaq. It becomes zihar, because it cannot be the two at the same time. It cannot be zihar and talaq at the same time. So it will just go towards zihar because it is more consistent with the wording of zihar than it is with the wording of talaq. So when you have two different legal conducts, then we will go by the most apparent, the closer to the wording or to the utterance. Okay. Now, the third section is the most detailed one, and it will take a little bit of time. So it's been 45 minutes. We have 15 minutes. What should we do? We can split it. You guys will remember next time? Okay. We'll split it. Just a review before you come next time, because it's important to, Okay. So we said here, worship plus worship. Worship plus worship can be one of three things. Farida, an obligation, plus farida, plus another obligation. Sunnah, plus sunnah, and certainly here farida, plus sunnah. Try to always, fiqh needs people who are good at math. try to think algorithmically. Fiqh needs algorithms, needs your mind to be organized. Always think about algorithms, divisions, algorithms, charts, graphs. Make this, like when you're studying, you do this yourself. Try to do this as much as you can. So anyway, now let us start by two fards. Two fards is very easy, and we're gonna get done with this in a minute, in 5 minutes. Okay, so he says here, al-jam'u bayna mafrudatayn, combining two obligatory acts. Actually, that's me saying this. So فلا يصح إلا في الحج والعمرة وهي واجبة في الغسل والوضوء فهما عبادتان من جنس واحد فدخلت الصغرى في الكبرى لكن لا يجوز له الجمع بين قضاء وكفارة أو ظهر وعصر أو زكاة وفدية. So it's not valid except in Hajj and Umrah, also obligatory in the madhab, also in ghusl and wudu. They are two acts of worship of the same genus, etc. Okay, I just want you fard and fard. Fard and fard by default doesn't work. To combine fard and fard, think about this. By default, fard and fard doesn't work. Just remember this, doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work. And now, let's talk about a few exceptions. Let's talk about a few exceptions. But fard and fard works? No, fard and fard doesn't work. That's what you need to remember. Let's talk about a few exceptions. Fard and fard, no, doesn't work, except Hajj and Umrah. Okay. Ghusl and wudu. What about kafarat, expiations? Yes, expiations can sometimes overlap. Expiations can sometimes overlap, but we will talk about expiations in some detail next time. But for now, when it comes to the acts, acts of worship, when it comes to acts that are intended for themselves and acts that are means to other acts, to the performance of other, these are means. These are not intended for themselves. Ghusl and wudu are not intended for themselves. Like you always make wudu for something. Although it's a great ibadah and you get rewarded for the very act of wudu and so on, still a means to, making salah permissible for you to remove your ritual impurity and so on. But Hajj and Umrah are acts that are intended for themselves. Umrah in the Hanbali madhab is wajib. In the Hanbali madhab, Umrah is wajib. And I think it's the Shafi'i as well. So Hanbali and Shafi'i, not in the Maliki and Hanafi. But Hanbali and Shafi'i, Umrah is wajib. Do we have the ability to combine Hajj and Umrah? Yes, al-Qarin, person performing Hajj and Umrah together. In the madhab, they don't do anything more than the mufrid, the person who's doing Hajj only. In the madhab, they don't do anything more than the mufrid, the person who's doing Hajj only. Okay? So here, they were able to combine two obligatory acts together. And one went into the other, even though each one is intended for itself. It's just not a wasila. It's not a means like ghusl and wudu. Okay? Great. Now, if you have two acts of worship of the same genus, and one of them is minor and the other one is major, the minor goes under the major. Ghusl and wudu. Ghusl and wudu. If you make ghusl, it will suffice for wudu. You make ghusl, you're intending just to remove all impurities, major and minor, it will suffice for your wudu. So ghusl and wudu. Now, so we said that these are exceptions. And we said that the rule is farida and farida do not mix. There is like a ruling in the Hanbali madhab that when you are a masbuq, a latecomer to the prayer, you are a latecomer to the prayer. You came in and the imam is in ruku', and you join the prayer, and you make takbirat al-ihram, Allahu Akbar, and then you go down to ruku'. What about the takbirah of ruku'? Is the takbirah of ruku', when you make when you're praying and you want to make ruku', you will say Allahu Akbar and make ruku', right? Is the takbirah of ruku' wajib in the Hanbali madhab? It's not wajib in the Hanafi madhab, for instance, but is it wajib in the Hanbali madhab to make takbirah for ruku'? Yes, it is wajib. Wajib. What about the takbirah of al-ihram, consecration of prayer? What about this takbirah? Wajib? It's a pillar. It is a pillar. A rukn. Okay. But for the sake of this discussion, we're just treating all obligations as obligations. So these are two obligations. Okay. If we say two obligations cannot be put together, you can't intend the two obligations with the same intention. How come in the Hanbali madhab they would allow you to say Allahu Akbar once and go down to ruku' without repeating Allahu Akbar? There's a difference in the madhab. Some people in the madhab would say that one intention is sufficient for both takbirs. One, you make the intention for takbirat al-ihram and takbirat al-ruku' together. That is a minor position in the madhab. That is not the dominant position. The dominant position is if you make the intention for takbirat al-ihram and takbirat al-ruku' together, your salah is invalid. If you make the intention for takbirat al-ihram and takbirat al-ruku' together, you say Allahu Akbar intending takbirat al-ihram and the takbirat al-ruku' together, your salah is invalid. But they would still allow you to make one takbirah and go down to ruku'. You make the intention of takbirat al-ihram only, and takbirat al-ruku' tasqut, is waived, falls off, because you are masbuq, you are a latecomer, and the imam is in ruku'. Do you see that like subtlety? Inshallah, Allah is most generous, like He did in this. But some people get a little bit frazzled when it gets to this intricate or subtle. Allah is most generous, most merciful, most gracious. Don't panic. But anyway, these are the fiqhi details because they want it to be, it's about consistency with the rules and the principles of fiqh. And fiqh is like math. How Allah deals with people, Allah is most generous. You want to be correct as much as you can. But like I said, even scholars within the same madhab, they disagreed over this. So some scholars within the madhab would say that if you say Allahu Akbar intending both takbirat al-ihram and ruku', it will count for both. The others will say it invalidates your prayer because you can't mix two intentions of obligations simultaneously, except if you have a proof. And the proof that comes from the Prophet ﷺ is clear on Hajj and Umrah. And they never demanded wudu from someone who made ghusl. So except if you have a proof. But the default is two obligations. You can't combine the niyyah of two obligations together. They want it to be consistent. And here in Takbirah, they wanted to say that the takbirah that you're making if you are a latecomer or a masbuq is takbirat al-ihram. Do not intend that you're making the takbirah of ihram and ruku' in one single action, because that doesn't work. They're both obligatory. So since one is rukn, pillar, that is takbirat al-ihram or the consecration, then intend that you're making takbirat al-ihram. The other one falls off, is waived, because you're late. So next time, inshallah, we will have the discussion on الجمع بين الفرد والمندوب والجمع بين المندوبين. So combining farida and sunnah and combining two sunnahs. Combining farida and sunnah and combining two sunnah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. And we will come back at 9:15. I'm giving you 18 minutes.